All right, you lot, strap yourselves in for a deep dive on Marco Polo.
Oh boy, here we go.
This is the dude who supposedly bummed around Asia and got chummy with Kublai Khan, right?
That's the one.
So let's cut the crap. Was this guy for real or just the original king of bullshit?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? His book, The Travels of Marco Polo, has been a bestseller for centuries.
Centuries. Damn.
Yeah, but historians are still arguing over how much of it is actually true. The crazy thing is the amount of detail he throws in there, and a surprising amount of it lines up with modern research.
No shit. So this wasn't just some medieval wank fest.
Hold your horses. We'll get to that. First, you gotta understand where this guy came from. Polo was born into a family of Venetian merchants.
Those guys were like the OG international businessmen, right?
Absolutely. But even for them, taking a trip to the East back then was like launching into fucking space.
No GPS, no antibiotics, no fucking room service. Yikes.
It was a hardcore move, no doubt. And get this, his dad and uncle, Niccolo and Maffeo, were already seasoned travelers. They'd actually met Kublai Khan years before Marco was even born.
Seriously. So this whole Asia thing was a family tradition.
Seems like it. Imagine that, selling everything you own, turning it into a backpack full of jewels, and taking off on this insane journey across Asia.
Fuck me. These guys were ballsier than a sack full of dildos.
No kidding.
So picture this. You're a teenager in 13th century Venice, probably bored out of your skull, and your old man and uncle decide to drag you along on this epic trip to the most exotic places on Earth.
That would be something else, wouldn't it?
Talk about a culture shock. You'd be swapping pigeons for pagodas, gondolas for, what, camels?
Probably. We're talking about the Silk Road, deserts, mountains, bandits. Who knows what the hell they encountered.
Forget being pissed off, I'd be shitting myself the whole way.
Well, sanitation wasn't exactly a priority back then, but hey, they survived.
They did more than survive. They made it all the way to Kublai Khan's court in Chengdu.
Modern-day Beijing, by the way.
Fancy that. But hold on, here's where it gets interesting. Marco's only 21 at this point, right?
Right.
And he somehow manages to win over Kublai Khan, the most powerful dude on the planet. That sounds a bit fishy, doesn't it?
It does, but Marco had a knack for languages and a talent for fitting in.
So he was like a medieval chameleon.
Sort of. Those skills, along with his smarts and, let's be honest, a fair bit of luck, made him valuable to the Khan.
You're saying he wasn't just some random tourist gawking at the sights?
Not at all. He became Kublai Khan's foreign emissary, sent on missions all over the empire.
Hold the fucking phone. He was like a diplomat for the biggest, baddest ruler on Earth. Seriously.
Seriously. He went to places like Burma, India, Indonesia, even Vietnam. He also traveled extensively within China itself, spending almost 2 decades there. Think about it. He saw things no other European had ever laid eyes on before.
Okay, so he had one hell of a story to tell. But how do we know he wasn't just making shit up? Was he really in the thick of it, or just spinning yarns back in Venice?
That's where the details come in. Marco's book mentions events that are actually backed up by other historical sources. For instance, he describes the Mongol princess Kukuchin traveling to Persia to marry Arghun Khan. This same event is documented in both Persian and Chinese sources, completely independent of Marco Polo.
So maybe he wasn't talking out of his arse after all.
There's more. He also talks about Christian churches in Zhenjiang, a city in China.
Christian churches in China?
What the fuck? I know, right? But this detail is supported by a 14th century Chinese text. It mentions a Sogdian guy who set up several Nestorian Christian churches in the area. Now, the Sogdians were from Iran, and they were all over the Silk Road trading their wares.
So globalization is nothing new, eh?
Exactly. The fact they were in China, along with these Nestorian Christian churches, shows just how much cultural exchange was happening back then. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, I'm starting to see why people have been obsessed with this story for so long. But hold up, if this guy was really traipsing all over China, how come he never mentions the Great Wall? Tea. Chopsticks.
That's one of the things that makes people skeptical.
Did he even leave his room?
Hold on. There are explanations for some of those omissions. The Great Wall we know today was mostly built much later by the Ming Dynasty, centuries after Marco Polo. And foot binding, well, pretty fucked up, wasn't as widespread then.
So you're saying he just forgot about tea and chopsticks? Was his memory as shit as the toilets back then?
Look, his book is full of economic details about stuff like currencies, salt production, and all sorts of trade routes. That's not the kind of thing a casual observer would know, suggesting he was really plugged into Chinese society.
All right, fair enough. But what about his bromance with Kublai Khan? Was he really best buddies with the emperor, or was that just bullshit?
That's a good question. Some historians think he was a high-ranking official, maybe even a governor. Others think he might have exaggerated his role to make his book more exciting.
So did this guy actually wield any real power, or was he full of shit?
Yeah. It's hard to say for sure, but there's an interesting clue. A recent study suggested that Marco Polo might actually be the Boluo mentioned in some old Chinese records.
Buluo, who the fuck is that?
He was a courtier who apparently got in trouble for, shall we say, getting a little too friendly with a certain lady.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
The thing is, this Bulo was arrested, but then Kublai Khan himself had him released. That suggests he had some serious pull. What's more, the dates and places mentioned in the Chinese account match up with some of the stuff Marco Polo describes in his book.
So we might actually have a Chinese record of Marco Polo. That's mental.
It's not definitive proof, but it's a pretty intriguing possibility. Even if he wasn't a governor, Marco must have held a position of some importance to have access to all the information he wrote about.
Okay, I'm almost convinced this guy wasn't a complete bullshitter. But what about his ghostwriter, Rustichello de Pisa? Didn't he jazz up the story a bit to sell more books to those gullible Europeans? You know, throw in a dragon or two, maybe a unicorn for good measure?
Well, Rustichello was known for writing romances, so he definitely had a flair for the dramatic. It's possible he embellished some details to make the story more exciting for Western readers.
Makes sense. Marco Polo battles a giant panda. Now that's a bestseller.
But even if that's the case, the core details of Marco's account are surprisingly accurate.
So, after all this, where do we stand on Marco Polo? Is he a total fraud, or did he actually pull off the most epic trip of all time?
It's more complicated than that. Even if we question some details, we can't deny the impact his book had on Europe. Imagine being a European back then. You think the world ends at the edge of the Mediterranean. Then this book drops, describing advanced civilizations with massive cities, strange customs, and unimaginable wealth. It completely changed their perception of the East.
Yeah, I can see how that would blow people's minds.
It absolutely did. It fueled their imaginations and sparked their curiosity, making them realize the world was far bigger than they thought. Hell, even Christopher Columbus was obsessed with Marco Polo's book. It inspired him to sail west, hoping to reach the Indies.
Damn, that's heavy. So even if Marco Polo stretched the truth a bit, he basically opened up the world for Europe.
In a way, yes. He revealed entire civilizations they never even knew existed.
All right, I gotta admit, this is blowing my mind. I started this thinking Marco Polo was a total bullshit artist, but now I'm not so sure. What other crazy shit did this guy get up to?
Well, his life after China was pretty wild, too. Remember, Venice was at war with Genoa at the time?
Ah, those Italian city-states. Always scrapping over something. Bunch of drama queens, the lot of them.
Right. And Marco, never one to shy away from a good time, he decided to join the Venetian Navy.
Wait, so the guy who just spent years trekking across the bloody Silk Road signs up to play sailor boy?
Yep. And get this, he gets captured by the Genoese in a naval battle.
Oh, shit. That's got to bruise the ego, going from hanging with Kublai Khan to being some Genoese prisoner.
You'd think, right? But here's the thing, his imprisonment is actually what led to his famous book.
What? Did he carve it into the cell wall or something?
Not quite. He shared a cell with this guy named Rustichello de Pisa. Turns out, Rustichello was a professional writer.
Ah, so this Rustichello fella is the one who actually put Marco's stories down on paper.
Exactly. They worked on the book together while they were stuck in that Genoese prison. Pretty ironic, isn't it?
Sounds like some fucked up fairy tale. Locked up, but instead of a princess, he gets a ghostwriter.
Right. Marco Polo's most enduring legacy, born out of his captivity. If those Genoese hadn't captured him, who knows if we even know his story today.
Crazy how things work out. So you mentioned some stuff Marco didn't mention in his book, like the Great Wall and tea. You said there were reasons for that.
Exactly. You got to remember, he was writing for a European audience who'd never seen a pagoda, let alone tasted tea. He had to explain things in a way they'd get.
So dumb it down for those simpletons, basically.
More like, highlight the things that would really blow their minds. Imagine if you were writing about a trip to Mars. You wouldn't bore people with details about Martian McDonald's, would you?
Fuck no. I'd be talking about three-headed aliens and zero-gravity orgies.
Exactly. Maybe Polo just didn't think the Great Wall or tea were that mind-blowing compared to everything else he saw.
Yeah, but what about foot binding? Now that's pretty fucked up. You'd think he'd mention something that bizarre.
A couple of possibilities there. First, foot binding was mostly an upper-class thing, so it might not have been as widespread during Marco's time. And second, Maybe he just found it too disturbing to write about. He wanted to present a positive picture of China, you know?
Didn't want to scare the shit out of his readers. Hey, these people are super advanced, but they also crush women's feet for fun. Not exactly a selling point.
Exactly. It's all about context. Polo's book wasn't meant to be a Chinese encyclopedia, just a collection of stories to entertain and inform.
All right, fair enough. But even if we take everything Polo says with a grain of salt, the sheer distance he traveled is insane.
Absolutely. We're talking 13th century, no cars, no trains, no planes, just horses, camels, and blisters. And he was gone for nearly 25 years.
That's longer than some people's marriages these days.
Right. And it wasn't just China either. He hit Persia, India, Sumatra, Sri Lanka. The guy was a travel machine.
Makes you wonder what it was like being him. All those sights, sounds, smells.
Total sensory overload. And remember, he experienced all of this without any modern technology. No Google Maps, no translation apps, no Instagram to document every fart.
Couldn't even snap his selfie with Kublai Khan. What a shame.
True, but that's part of what makes his story so powerful. He experienced the world with fresh eyes, no preconceived notions.
And had to rely on his own wits and balls to survive. No wonder he became such a legend.
Exactly. He embodies that spirit of adventure and discovery that still resonates with people today. His story is a reminder that there's always more to see and learn about the world.
You mentioned earlier that Polo's book was supposed to entertain as well as inform. Give us some of the crazier stories he told. Did he ever embellish things to make his travels sound even more badass?
Oh, there's definitely a sense of wonder and excitement throughout the book. Marco had a knack for storytelling, that's for sure. And yeah, there are moments where he might have exaggerated a bit, but even if he added some flair, the core of his story is surprisingly accurate.
All right, spill the beans. What kind of tall tales we were talking about?
One that comes to mind is his description of the siege of Zhangyang. This was a major battle between the Mongols and the Song dynasty, and Polo claimed he and his family actually helped the Mongols conquer the city, said they taught them how to build siege weapons.
Wait, you're telling me that Kublai Khan, the biggest badass on the planet, needed a couple of Venetian merchants to teach him how to build a fucking catapult?
That's what Polo claimed. But historians know the siege of Zhangyang ended before Polo even arrived in China.
So he basically inserted himself into a major historical event. Ballsy move.
Right. It's possible he heard the story from someone else and then just worked it into his narrative. Or maybe he just wanted to make himself sound more important.
It's like when your mate's telling a story about some crazy night out, making himself the hero, even though he was passed out on the couch half the time.
Exactly. We all know someone like that. But even if Polo stretched the truth, his story is still compelling. And remember, this was centuries before fact-checking websites.
True, back then you could make up any old shit, and people would believe it. Fake news is nothing new.
Absolutely. But Polo's book wasn't just about sensational stories. He also provided valuable information about the geography, culture, and economy of the East.
You mentioned earlier that he talked about things like currencies and salt production. What other insider details did he reveal?
He talked about the use of paper money in China, which was mind-blowing back then. He wrote about the postal system, the crazy court rituals, the different ethnic groups he encountered.
So he was basically a one-man CIA.
In a way, yeah.
Right.
And his insights helped shape the European understanding of the East for centuries to come.
Okay, this is all fascinating stuff. But what happened to Marco Polo after he returned to Venice? Did he become a celebrity? Did he write more books? Did he run for Doge? Did he just kick back and count his riches after all that craziness?
Well, he tried to, but Venice was in a full-blown war with Genoa when he got back.
Those Italians, always at each other's throats. Couldn't they just share a pizza and calm the fuck down?
Apparently not. And Marco, always up for a bit of action, joined the Venetian Navy.
Hang on, the dude who just spent years exploring the frickin' Silk Road decides to become a sailor. What the hell was he thinking?
Beats me. Maybe he missed the sea, maybe he just loved a good fight. Whatever the reason, it didn't end well. He got captured by the Genoese in a naval battle.
Shit, that's rough. From Kublai Khan's palace to a Genoese prison cell. Talk about a come down.
It's a hell of a story, right? But here's the crazy part. That's actually how his book came about.
What? Did he, like, smuggle his diary out with a bribe or something?
Nah, nothing like that. He ended up sharing a cell with this guy, Rustichello da Pisa. And Rustichello, get this, was a professional writer.
Ah, so this Rustichello fella is the one who actually wrote down Marco's stories. Talk about a lucky break.
Exactly. They worked on the book together while stuck in that prison. Pretty wild, right?
It's like some twisted fairy tale. Gets locked up, but instead of a princess, he finds a ghostwriter.
It is, isn't it? Marco Polo's legacy, born out of captivity. If those Genoese hadn't caught him, we might not even know his story.
Crazy how things turn out. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant, turned Kublai Khan's right-hand man, explored all over Asia, wrote a book that changed the world. What's the biggest takeaway for you? What makes his story so damn interesting, even after all these centuries?
For me, it's the power of curiosity. Marco Polo dared to step outside his comfort zone, embrace the unknown, see the world with fresh eyes. That's something we can all learn from, even today.
Yeah, he wasn't just some tourist taking selfies and buying souvenirs. He was out there living it, learning languages, immersing himself in all these different cultures. A true pioneer.
Absolutely. And him sharing those experiences, even if they were sometimes exaggerated, it opened up new worlds for the people back home, sparked their imaginations, helped kick off the age of exploration.
So even if some of the details are a bit iffy, the core of his story, the adventure, the discovery, the human element, that's what sticks with people, even now.
I think you've nailed it. Marco Polo's story reminds us that the world is a vast and incredible place, full of mysteries to uncover. And even in today's hyper-connected world, there's always something new to learn, something that can challenge us and broaden our horizons.
Well said. All right, folks, that's it for our deep dive into the world of Marco Polo. Hope you enjoyed the ride. And who knows, maybe it'll inspire you to get out there and explore some uncharted territory yourself. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep those adventure juices flowing. Cheers.